Hello, welcome to Smoking with Swami. I'm Swami Chaitanya, and this is Nikki Swami.
Hi.
And we're here to talk today about what?
You know, it's interesting. I get a lot of responses from our faithful followers out there on YouTube that are really surprisingly interested in the old days.
The old days. Well,
And,
let's light up a joint first.
Just like the old days.
Swami, we got to roll another one. Mm-hmm.
But it really fascinates me. I mean, we love to talk about cannabis. We can talk about a million things. But people are really curious. And I guess as, you know, we're coming up on the Summer of Love's 50th anniversary in 2017.
But I thought we'd talk more about the India part, right?
Well, that's all part of it.
Because, see, a friend of ours just came with a book he wrote about this guy, Eight Finger Eddie. And I hope it's in focus. And he, it's the story of Eight Finger Eddie, who was a main figure in the cannabis community in Kathmandu and in Goa.
Well, Eddie got there in the late 60s. He was one of the first hippies to get over to India.
He was kind of our hippie guru. And in those days, you came overland primarily, and somehow you'd get to Amsterdam.
Well, I think we got to go back a little. Because
where?
Why did people go to India? You know, why are this going to India? You know, why was this exodus of hippies? Because what happened was in the Haight-Ashbury and places like that around the world that were centers of hippiedom, around 1968, even 67, some people say it was finished, you know. I mean, the bad drugs started coming in like speed. I know, it was still great. It was still great. But it did change.
Right.
And so a lot of people that had been there already through the very first day said, screw this, let's go to
why
India or someplace
because,
exotic.
No, because there was a whole thing in the hippie community about yoga.
Yeah.
And Buddhism and meditation and all that sort of stuff. And Allen Ginsberg had gone, right? And Ram Dass had gone, and those people. And they brought back all this kind of exotic, wild information about a place where cannabis was just totally part of the culture.
Well, and if you think about it, in 1967 is only 20 years after India had gained independence from England.
Right.
So it was like a wide open place that suddenly you could go to so much easier and just...
Right,
wow.
and 67
and you could go overland, so it was cheap.
Right.
You know, back in those days. I mean, I went overland. You did too. That's how you did it.
Right. So I flew to Amsterdam with my girlfriend at the time, Mireille, and we spent the night in a houseboat in Amsterdam, and then hitchhiked through Europe, all the way through Germany and down into Austria. And then it turns out in Austria they just don't pick up hitchhikers. So, you know, kind of one of these fantasies come true. We managed to catch the Orient Express, right? Not the fancy one, but still it was like the Orient Express through Romania and Bulgaria, and we end up all of a sudden in Istanbul, right? And like this whole trip, of course, we're not smoking any hash, I tell you that for sure. But then we go across Turkey in a train to Erzurum, right? But you went a whole other way, right? How did you go?
Oh boy, I take it you flew from San Francisco?
Yeah.
So I went the cheapest way available. It was 1977, my old boyfriend David and I. And we took a Greyhound bus from San Francisco to Montreal. 3 days across the country. And then in Montreal we got a Russian cruise ship, a Russian ship. It was the cheapest way to get overseas in those days. It was cheaper than flying. A Russian classless society ship. This was when it was still the Soviet Union, actually. So
it wasn't Russian.
It was. That's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story.
And then
we got to keep moving.
We got to England, and in England we spent a little bit of time. Then took that magic hippie bus, whatever it was called, to Greece. Spent a little time in Greece, and then hitched a ride on a yacht over to Turkey. So then we also got to Turkey. Went to Erzurum, the armpit of the universe.
No, they have great halva there.
No, it's really dumb.
No, it's the far eastern part of Turkey. And not far from the Mount Ararat.
Yeah, it's not so nice. So beautiful, maybe, but so then overland from there, as you know. Yeah.
Actually, I remember better. Murray and I flew to London. Mm-hmm. They were really cheap flights, San Francisco to London. And we spent like a week in London with my friend Jerry Erdman and so on. We took acid in Hyde Park. And then we went by train and then boat to Amsterdam, and then we hitchhiked, right?
So I guess what we're talking about today, because sometimes we never know till we get started, is the Hippie Trail.
The Hippie Trail.
This is what it was called.
Right, that's true.
And it's really really a privilege to
So
say we've done
right.
it.
So we went. Yeah, we went through Iran. We went through Iran on buses.
Yeah, because after Turkey, there's no more trains. So you have to do buses, bullock carts, whatever you can find.
And Iran was still under the Shah at that time, right? But still, I tell you, still no hash, right?
Iran, I ended up in a bus.
So then we
we ended up in Tehran at 2 in the morning.
Oh God!
2 in the morning, no place to stay.
Jamshid.
Slept on the streets of Tehran with other people just lined up on the streets. That was an experience at 20 years old or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then from Iran,
buses across to Mashhad and
lovely
finally
Afghanistan.
Right.
Finally, you get to Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, right?
And now the whole thing's worth it. Those hours.
So in the customs compound, right, where passports and so on.
Yeah.
The head of the whole immigration thing invites us for a cup of tea
in Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan, right? And the night before, someone had offered us already charas, hashish, right in the customs compound. It's like it's right there. And so then later on, we spent a little time in Kabul. But
wait! You're not talking about the hash. So okay,
we're not talking about
this
hash.
is a cannabis show. So this is important, folks. So here you are in Afghanistan. You know, I arrived, got in Kabul, and the first thing you do, the guy at the hotel or somebody, you know. Best quality. So you get some really nice charas, yeah.
Charas.
And it's just absolutely beautiful, thick black, like nothing you've ever seen living in America before. You know, it's just gorgeous.
Well, there wasn't much hash in America in those days anyway.
And then we did exactly what happens to everybody when they smoke Afghani hash. 2-toke blackout. Everybody, at the first time you smoke it, it's like gonk.
Just 2 hits, and you try and stand up, and it's like... back onto your cut.
Of course, by the second time you smoke it, you can handle it. It's okay, but yeah, that was the best.
And all throughout Afghanistan, and then from there on.
Well, this is in a nutshell. We're wrapping up a lot of stuff fast here. Spent a little bit of time in Afghanistan.
Okay, so finally we get to India, right?
Reasons.
And I went up to Nepal right away. And in Nepal, this is like what, 1969 or so, 1970. In Nepal.
You met Eddie? Did you meet Eddie there?
I did kind of meet Eddie, but I didn't realize it at the time. In those days, you went to the cabin restaurant, and that's where everyone was hanging out, and they made this little cake that had these little chocolate chips in it, but it turns out they weren't chocolate chips. They're hash chips, right? I mean, I had my first out-of-body experience after eating one of those whole cakes, right? It was pretty amazing. That you just sort of up on the ceiling looking down and you can see your body there and it's got this kind of blue aura all around it, and like I remember that I wanted to make sure I knew how to get back.
But Pai Ali actually, which was in Kathmandu,
right?
That reminds me, we didn't really give Afghanistan its due here, because Chicken Street, right? I mean, this is where there was tons of freaks on the streets of Afghanistan, and it just happened so fast.
Right. And there was still the Shah or the king in Afghanistan, and there were hippies back in the hills riding horses and buying carpets and bringing in huge amounts of hash.
This was stepping into 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights. Afghanistan more than any other country, absolutely. If you went to the bazaar in Kabul or Kandahar or any of these places.
It was amazing. There would be only like 2 or 3 automobiles, right?
It was like
There'd
not
be
even
horses,
the 19th century.
Everybody, and the women in total chador with the black or dark green with a little thing over they could just see out that.
And the guys would all be carrying old Enfield rifles that the British had left behind, because this is before us and the Russians got there and gave them all those fancy new toys.
Right.
They were the most beautiful, wonderful people. They still are, I'm sure. The Afghani people are resilient and strong.
Once you got out of Kabul, you were in the countryside, and there were almost no trees, right, everywhere. But up on somewhere, you'd see this kind of mud brick castle or fortress up on top of a hill, and it was so medieval and so on. It seemed like you were like somehow 1500 was still happening.
Okay, they delivered the water to the guest house in the
goatskins.
In the goatskin, they just have a whole goat, and they'd blow it up. And that would be filled with water, and on the guy's back with the legs over.
Right, yeah.
Anyway, okay, that's what we just had to say.
Hardly any electricity, no running water, all this kind of stuff. It was really back in the ancient times.
So, so probably I'm feeling like we're going to get to India, and that's going to be our next show.
The next show is going to be India, right?
Yeah.
That was the Hippie Trail, because...
I think so, because the trail itself is awfully important, because it was along the trail that we all met people, and people...
Also
gathered,
along
you'd
the
run
trail,
into the same
almost
freaks
everybody
over and
got
over.
sick too at some point or another, like diarrhea or dysentery or something like that. It was just part of that. It was a great weight loss campaign, right? You could definitely, drop the pounds that way, and but you also kind of traveled down at the lower end too.
But
right?
here's the thing: so you go through, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, then into Pakistan.
Well, wait. So what about those Afghani buses?
Oh, wait, and we didn't talk about the Khyber Pass.
Well, the Afghani buses, it's like an old school bus with all the seats taken out, and instead of seats, wooden benches across with just barely enough room for your knees, right? All the way across, no aisle in the middle even. And there's women and children and goats and chickens and
the floor is littered with watermelon seeds.
Watermelon seeds, and there's packs and grain, and up on the roof are all these grain sacks and everything else. And then when it, half the time the whole top roof is laden. I rode up on the roof a lot. It's like full of people up there, right? But this bus goes at maximum speed at about 10 miles an hour. Anyway,
it's good you've got that charge
all dirt
to
roads.
to before you go on some of those bus rides in those countries.
So we went from Kabul to Bamiyan, right, which is the place where those Buddhist carvings were in the caves that got destroyed. So we saw them before they were destroyed. And then went all the way into the middle of Afghanistan at a place called Bandi Amir, which is a chain of lakes. And this is the purest water you can possibly imagine in a country where there's no water. So it's a really sacred place, but it seems like it's somewhere on the moon.
So as I was saying,
Khyber Pass?
Then you get to, finally the day comes, you have to leave Afghanistan. India's calling, it's going to get cold. So
Jalalabad
you go to
is
get
the way,
to
right?
the Khyber Pass. Well, when you get to the foot of the Khyber Pass, which is the famous road that connects Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it was did the British put it in? No, it must have been there before. But when the British, never actually conquered Afghanistan, because they could not get through the Khyber Pass. They came through and they just shoot them off.
Well, no, they did that whole movie, The Man Who Would Be King, with your favorite Sean Connery.
Well, anyway, the Khyber Pass, when you get to the foot of the Khyber Pass to get to the other side, what you found was large old American cars. Like, Oldsmobiles or Chevrolets,
In Peshawar.
No, in Afghanistan. I went from that way.
Right.
And there'd be these giant cars, and you'd stuff like 13 people into the car and luggage, and then a couple people in the trunk, hanging out and all this. And these cars would drive up this twisty hill, and at the very top you would get to a place called Landi Kotal.
Oh, really?
Landi Kotal. Oh. And Landi Kotal was no man's land. Okay, so I was there in about 1977. In Landi Kotal, it was this small little bazaar is all it was, like a few little shacks that had...
Was that the border?
And all that they sold was guns and drugs. It was all guns and drugs. And the guns were all these, 1935 British Enfield rifles or something. And the drugs were just about anything you wanted. And it was pretty amazing. So then you'd get back in your little car and you go back down the other side into Pakistan, which is just... very dry.
I remember right at the border crossing, at the customs thing, immigration between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's this tiny little building. You walk in, and behind this guy sitting at this little desk are stacks and stacks and stacks of books with handwritten entries of everyone who's been in and out and through. And it's like, how could they possibly find someone 20 years ago that was like these stacks of ancient things? Everything was done so carefully by hand and so on, and Arabic letters and so on.
But anyway, I didn't spend much time in Pakistan that time.
Oh, in Pakistan? Oh, that's what I did in Pakistan. In Karachi, no, it wasn't Karachi. It's Lahore, which is quite a wonderfully cultured city in many ways. Lots of gardens and so on. Well, in Lahore, I had my first bang lassi. Now, if you've ever had bang lassi, it's a total over-the-top wipeout.
Cannabis experience.
It's a cannabis experience. It's what they do is they cook up some leaves and so on with a little bit of ghee at a very low temperature, and then it becomes inedible, right? And they mix it then with yogurt or lassi, right, which is yogurt and water or
rose water,
water and some cinnamon and a little throw in a banana or something like that. And you go into one of these shops in downtown Lahore and order one of these things, and you are just blissful flying the whole day, right, as you pop this down. It's an amazing edible. A bang lassi. Banana bang lassi is what we had. There was one, I forget the name of the place.
But I remember too, just to wrap up with a little bit of cannabis as we enter India. First of all, you go from Pakistan and the Indian border, and boom, right literally on the other side of the cage where the customs guy is green. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
It's like green. It's
Across
all
the
of a sudden
border.
you're entering beautiful tropical, everything of your visions you always wanted to see India look like. It's right there, you know, tropical.
Well, I had that
pine trees
experience
and
kind of in
palm
Peshawar, which
trees.
was green compared to
It was
Afghanistan.
so beautiful. But then I remember I went through to Amritsar, was the first place, and I was served papadams, the crispy little things, and they had marijuana seeds, cannabis seeds, ganja seeds.
Oh, far out. I never saw that.
Ganja
Yeah.
seeds in it, and that was really tasty.
So when I got to the
Anyway, I
border
think we-
between
yeah, okay.
Pakistan and India, the last thing before we just got there, someone had told me beforehand that the customs agent will just look you right in the eye and say, "Do you have any charas?" And so you have to be ready for that question
Wow.
to say, you know, that no, you don't, right?
Yeah.
So he says to me, "Do you have any charas?" I said, "No, no, no." And in my watch pocket of my Levi's, in those days I wore Levi's, the watch pocket of my Levi's had a tiny little chunk just to get me through, right? But I was forewarned and therefore forearmed. So anyway, so we got to the border of India, but we'll see. Maybe we want to a whole
I think
nother
we
episode.
should hold off there,
Yeah, a whole nother
Leave you
episode.
hanging.
Because
And,
we have to go to Kathmandu in
we'll do the
Nepal
Hippie
and
Trail.
go in India and points in between. Om Namah Shivaya. We hardly even finished this joint. Anyway,
Thanks for watching.
thanks for watching. See you later.